Hey there, it's Dan, and here I am again in my studio in Denver with another kind of exercise to work on in your watercolor. And this is going to be about kind of just playing with warms and cools and kind of getting an understanding for how temperature mixed with proper tone can really inform what you're doing with your painting and give you some fun exercise to kind of play with just to make a painting, develop your understanding of the medium, and kind of understand the importance of warm and cool, and what is warm and what is cool. Well, typically, you know, the yellows in through the reds maybe are, those are kind of traditionally warm colors, and then moving into the sort of bluish purple, then into the purples and blues become cooler colors. They could be greens also. But really what ends up happening is it becomes relative. So I do have a warm and a cool of each primary in my palette, a warm and a cool yellow, warm and a cool red. And what that means is, a red is either fire engine red in my cadmium red, or if I compare the alizarin crimson to that red, it's actually cooler. It's still a warm color, but it's cooler than the hot red. Same thing in the yellows. Yellow ochre is a much kind of warmer color than the cadmium yellow. It's a cooler yellow, even though it's still a pretty hot yellow. So anyway, we're going to reduce this down to just, I'm going to use actually cobalt blue and burnt sienna to paint through this exercise here. And we could take a look up here at the reference. And we'll have a little picture of my palette here too, so you can see what's going on there. But the image I've actually used, this is the original reference picture, and I've switched it out. I've just kind of desaturated it a little bit into a little less vibrant, because really this isn't about trying to match the colors that's in the image. It's just about pushing those colors into warms, into cools, and kind of playing with the sort of pattern of cool into warm, back into cool, back into warm, and it creates a rhythm of temperature in the painting, and that's what we're really going to be looking at. So I'll pop this drawing in here rather quickly. I've chosen a pretty, it's an interesting textured subject, but it's it's fairly, I'll say it's a fairly, well, I like to say it's simple. It is complicated, but I'm going to treat it in a little bit of more of a simple fashion. And I do have a class coming up on rocks and painting those kinds of things. So I'm not going to get too concerned about a lot of this rock texture. I'll put in a little bit of it, but I'm really more concerned about just playing with the temperatures of this particular scene. So just kind of zip through the drawing. Again, not being too much of a slave to my reference, just getting enough of the gist of what I'm looking at. Finding some of the patterns and just starting to kind of block them in. We have this nice, I'm actually going to bring this rock in front here. That'll do us. All right, so here we go. And again, this is going to be cobalt blue and burnt sienna. And I'm not trying to color match. I'm going to be playing with the tone, and I'm going to be just shifting these back and forth between warm and cool. And, again, that's one of the beauties of watercolor is the ability to just slightly shift. I could push it a little warmer, push it a little cooler. And by reducing this down to two colors, I don't want to say it makes it easy, but it makes it easier in the sense of I've only got a warm and a cool to deal with. So if I want it a little warmer, I'll put a little bit more burnt sienna in it. If I want to cool it a little bit, I'll put a little bit more cobalt blue. Seems pretty simple. It's not always the case, but all right. So I'm going to start with a warm and a cool pile. So I'm going to make a, basically I'm going to have my burnt sienna here. You can see over in the burnt sienna here, cobalt blue here, and I'm going to be working between these two, that's fun, working between these two puddles essentially, but I'll also be really mindful and careful about changing the consistencies. So I'm going to start fairly thin, fairly translucent, and I'll get meatier, I'll get a little juicier in those mixes to build up volume also. So here we go. And I'm going to start with just a little bit of, I'm not going to totally match this pattern in the sky, but a little bit of a slightly warmer pattern for where there's just some sort of cloud stuff coming through here. Just a little bit, not getting too crazy. And I'll get some more blue in here and start to kind of frame into that. All right, that's going to be nice. But I do want just a little bit of a pattern shooting in through here. Picking up that bead of pigment. And I'm going to shift the sky into, I'm going to bring a little bit more warmth in here as it comes down. And really what that does, it kind of grays it off, but adds just a little bit more warmth there. All right, so continuing through, now I am going to use more of a, I'm going to start very warm here in this underpainting. And this is only going to be the base. This will just be the base of these rocks. I'm going to do this in essentially a two-wash approach where I'm kind of establishing the local color first, and then putting another wash on top that's going to change the temperatures. So I'm going to keep this nice and vibrant and loose to start with. Let's see. And I am looking at where does this pattern of warmth come through. Kind of comes about there in what I'm looking at. All right. And again, once I'm through with that, I'll pick up this bead of pigment. And I'm going to come in with some cool. But there's still some warmth in it, so I'm playing between these two puddles. So it's not totally cool, but it's cooler than this warmth. And I'll drop some of this in here and I'll leave a little highlight across that piece of the rock there. And a little more warmth where this spills in a little bit stronger here. There we go, that'll make that edge. Back to this idea of some coolness. So far, so good. I'm leaving some nice little spots of highlight. I don't like wall-to-wall painting. I'm leaving some sparkles and loveliness in there. And I'm actually going to wash out some of this now. So I'm coming with just water. And I'm going to wash this down to give me some variation and highlights in the tone here. So I'm kind of putting in a lighter tone and then washing out. Well, I'm putting in basically a mid-tone, and then I'm washing out some of the pigment to create lighter areas. We'll just let that all mix and mingle. That's going to be lovely. And then down here I'll come back into more of an idea of warmth for where the base of all this stuff sits. And it's just lovely mixing together, creating this really nice pattern, harmonious. Not too hard with just two colors, but what I'm really looking for is this pattern of cool to warm to cool, and then a little bit of warmth back down here. And I might just go a little bit stronger with some warmth over here, just to kind of ground this a little bit more. There we go. All right, so that is the first wash, and now I'm gonna let this dry and move into kind of putting in some detail stuff. So we'll be right back. You can do this with any subject. I am kind of cheating here a little bit because it is basically just a warm and a cool painting. It's, you know, the ochre and burnt sienna in the rocks, and then, you know, the blue in the sky, the gray in the rocks. But I'm really just pushing this between the two colors, so that's all I have to play with to play with these temperature changes. Okay, so we're dry, we're ready to go with our next layer. And again, the lesson in this is to understand those temperature changes and how we can create patterns and rhythms in our painting. So I am concerned with the color when I'm doing things, but I'm also concerned about, is that, you know, with greens, is that a warm green or is it a cool green? With blues, is that a cool blue or is it a warm blue? If I want a warmer blue, I'm going to use French ultramarine. It's got some red in it. So, you know, in those subtle shifts, and again, watercolor is the perfect medium for these subtle, elegant little shifts. All right, so here we go. We're going to start with the next pass on this. And I'm just going to grab another brush here. So I'm using Saunders 140-pound rough paper right now. And I'm using a Daniel Smith burnt sienna and actually a Holbein cobalt blue. Those are the two brands of the colors I'm using. And now I'm going to come in with it's a swirl round, so it's a nice soft natural brush and really good for creating organic shapes. And when it comes down into doing more detail stuff, I'll come in with this Perla as a number 12 Perla from Escoda. All right, here we go. Here we go. Just playing with these two colors, and let's see what happens. I'll be just pushing between warms and cools here. And again, I'm not super concerned with detail. When I do exercises like this, I'm really more just interested in building and playing with the idea of the painting without getting too caught up in specifics. So now I'm going to throw some blue into here and actually cool down this corner. There's a really nice dark corner that frames this in here, and I'm going to use this cool and getting a little meatier. And while this is wet, I'll drop in pieces to start to build some interest. And again, this is all going to be just vibrating color between warm and cool in here. And I'll look for spots, just looking for patterns, looking for little pieces, little bits of information. And I'm going to throw some more warmth in there and frame in the idea of where this rock comes down through. And I want to be pretty careful here just to keep this nice edge. There we go, nice broken edge there. And I've given myself a little bit of a nice spot to kind of like hold up. So I'm always looking for areas where I can kind of do what needs to be done and then create little spots where I can kind of say, okay, you know what, I can breathe here, I can take a break. So that gives me a nice little area to kind of, and this is a nice little bit more of a dark edge on here. And now I'm going to come with just water and soften some of this. So this is now just water, and I want to kind of bring this into creating some runs. I need to soften that all in there. But there's this idea where the rock kind of turns into a little bit of a all right, so we can live with that for now. And now a little bit more cool. I'm seeing basically when it comes into some of these darks, I'm seeing more coolness into those shadow areas, so I'm just kind of dropping into that water to create some nice idea of differences in temperature. So this is all just bouncing back and forth between warms and cools. And I think I'm going to cool down this whole area. Well, how can I do that? Well, I'm just going to take blue and just let this blue push and run into that and kind of cool down that whole section. Lovely. Oh, lovely. All right, so then when we come into this area here, again, I'm just going to look for some of the ideas of pattern. And be shifting between warms and cools, and also being very careful of the consistency. So when I want thicker darks, that's going to be thicker pigment, and I'm going to control that, hopefully, and sort of work back and forth and just keep working while I can as far as pushing and pulling the I'm going to be mixing back and forth between water, pigment, going back and forth, not letting anything be done until I say it's done or want it to be done. All right, so far so good. And if I want a little more control and a little more detail, I will come in with this other brush. And really thick pigment, just a little bit on the tip. I use my sponge, pick that up, pick that back up, and I can start to drop in really nice darks. And some nice pieces that come in here to build that. Some more darks here. And as soon as an area dries, then I'll kind of stop messing with it in the same way. I'll be a little bit more careful. Warm and cool, warm and cool. Let's see here, there's a darker spot that comes here. And then we can deepen up this edge. But the most important thing is this idea of kind of control in the wet into wet. So I am doing wet into wet, but I'm keeping it very sort of controlled where I want it. And again, I will put in some other, I'll probably put another layer of detail in after this, but just building this up for now. And it's amazing what you can do with two colors. You can have a whole career with two colors, like Andrew Wyeth, very big on this two color idea. And burnt sienna works well for or I'm sorry, French ultramarine you can do this with too. I just I decided to go with the cobalt today. Sometimes with the French ultramarine you can kind of get a little bit dirty in a way. So we'll see. All right. Back and forth. Sometimes it's thicker pigment that I'm then coming and adding water to and a little bit more warmth. Just kind of going back and forth. Like this. I'm going to build this up just a little bit, bringing that warmth just up. Warming that up a little bit. And more warmth there. And some dry brushing that warmth on top of there to kind of bring that spot in over this rock here. There we go. Just looking at patterns, playing with that. Now some more cool into that. And I'm going to frame this rock in with some nice cool over on this side. Oops. I'm going to keep that light. There we go. I'm just going to soften that up into there. And as we come over here in this rock, this will be, again, just looking for a tone that is, you know, a little bit more in the neutral. So when I'm playing with the warms and cools, there's also this idea of if I don't push it too far one way or the other, it creates a neutral. So it just kind of makes a nice neutral gray. And we'll come a little thicker again. And as I'm mixing, I'm looking, is that too warm? Is it too cool? A little bit of little shadow dark here. And I'm gonna just deepen in that corner to kind of hold that together there. Abstract over there. I mean, it's all abstract, but just enough to make shapes, cut shapes out. All right, where was I? Over here. Just picking up some of that stuff there. And we've got more warmth. It kind of comes in underneath here to frame in these kind of humps here. Start with that. Drop a little bit of cool into the dip here. And then this needs to be a nicer, darker cool. So thicker pigment. If I want deeper tone, it's thicker pigment. Less water, more pigment. I want this cool, but not too cool. And some dry brush will give me the idea of some of this detail. And as we move in here, there is some idea of this crack that comes in. This comes in. Nice dark there. And I'm going to lighten this and come in, and I can cut out, keep some nice light shapes in there. If I want to soften that, I can just use some water and soften that edge. This is not fully dry in here yet, so it's still kind of damp. So I can kind of dance in some of these little dark bits and a little more detail in there. Let's go a little bit in there. And just for fun, I might do a little bit of some splatter, just to add some sort of rockiness to this foreground here. Let's see. All right, let's do some of that here too. So I'm gonna actually build this a little deeper here with this warmth as it comes to us in the foreground. Again, dry brush is always going to give me wonderful effects. Oh, look at that temperature change, lovely. I'm gonna actually darken this corner too. More blue. I want to keep this dark and add as a little bit of a lead in, just so it kind of pushes me in that way just a little bit. Just darken that, no big whoop. And let's see here. All right, so at this point, have a nice heavy shadow here. And again, into this wetness, just a little bit of some darker splatters. And also some water splatters. So just a little back and forth between pigment and water, and that's going to give me all kinds of just interesting little detail-y stuff. And in this corner, I'm going to cool this down. Yeah, I think I want to. I'm just going to bring some of this up and get just a little bit of that dry brush texture through there. Just for some added interest. There we go. Getting fairly complicated with not much work. I'll throw some water in there to soften some of that. And all the while taking care of what is wet, what is dry, what can I get away with, what needs to stay. Kind of play with some of those edges there. I'm going to actually darken this more cool. This is going to be very thick stuff. Want some more dark underneath this ledge here. And just enough to give me this directional that kind of comes in. And then if I want just a little bit more, I'm not going to go, again, I'm not going to go too crazy with this, but a little bit more of just some detail stuff there. Because as soon as you start doing too much, you've done too much. So I'm trying to keep just enough here to say what I want to say. Looking for patterns, just looking for notes of things that are happening in the painting or in the reference, but again, not being a slave to it. Looking at little pieces here and there, saying, okay, I could see this little thing here. That's a little scratch out. That got a little too low there. I'm just gonna scratch that out. That's nice. And now I can build up this dark edge that's happening over here. Nice shadow that comes through. That's all, doesn't matter. All right, so that's kind of building a full painting just with two colors and making it really interesting. And it's but really what it is, it's a fun exercise to control the consistency of pigment. So if there's water on the paper, I'm using a thicker mix because it's mixing with that water on the paper. And then just shifting slightly between those two colors. But it's not just this color or that color. It becomes a slightly more blue with a little bit of burnt sienna or a little bit more. And I can push that puddle of cool. So let's say we got this nice big puddle of cool here. I can tap in just a little bit of burnt sienna to alter that. Or I can bring in more and more burnt sienna to really start to push that back into a warm temperature. So it becomes this back and forth of pushing and pulling, and I hope you guys try this exercise. I hope you enjoy it. I mean, for me, this is just a lot of fun because it's also, you know, when you with an abstract form like this, you can kind of just have fun, and it doesn't really matter. No one will know if it looks like that or not. So that's probably my one thing I love the most is I don't care. I just want it to look cool. How's that work? This is going to be really thick stuff. I'm going to put just a little piece of some maybe there's a little bit of just some foliage or something growing here, just to kind of, again, break that off. There we go. Don't be afraid to get in there and scratch, do things. And as always with this kind of scene, I feel like it needs to have a little hawk up here, kind of looking for his lunch. There we go. And maybe he's got a buddy. Let's give him a little flying mate there. Okay, so that's a pretty fun approach, and so I hope you have fun with this. Explore 2 colors. You can do a world of paintings, and just pushing, control the tone. You got to be careful of how much water and pigment is in your mixes, but I'm basically working thinner, getting thicker as I go, but then I'm also dumping water in to kind of lighten things. So it's this full back and forth. Anyway, I'm Dan Marshall. I have a June 23rd, there's a big workshop online. You can sign up over at danmarshallart.com. But we're going to be talking a lot about the idea of building these rocks and textures and simplifying complicated subjects. So until then, I will see you soon. Keep your brushes wet.